FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. So lots going on, but more importantly, we have Weir with us. You're familiar with his site. No doubt he's been on here numerous times, roadtorooted.com. And now to all of his other titles, we can add author. He's got a book out now. No doubt you've seen it, Road to Ruta. Hey, who would have thought? Catchy title, clever. And Bix, glad you're on. Want to talk to you about this book. You're doing well, I hope.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay ahead of everything, and it's kind of hard these days with all this stuff going on in Europe and with the dollar and the market rigging and gold and silver. You name it. There's lots to analyze and lots to talk about.
For sure, no question about it. And you've been at this for a long time. Finally, we get a book out of you. How long you been writing this book for?
Well, it started off as some articles I had written called Conversations with God about Gold and Silver. And it was kind of a funny way to take off on that Donald Walsh best-selling book, Conversations with God. But basically, I ask questions back and forth, and it really does. It simplifies everything because the markets can be complicated. The market manipulation can be complicated. So I started doing that, and I had written about 4 or 5 different conversations, and I decided about a year ago to turn it into a full-on book. And now there's 19 conversations about everything gold to silver to heaven and hell to you name it, the coming crash, and what we can do about it.
And I guess you've been at it for so long. I was just surprised that we saw a book out of you.
I'm excited. I think it's a great way to reach a different kind of audience because a lot of the private road stuff that I do, I know people can't afford, $200 a year membership. So the book's $25 and you can get it online, and it has a lot of the things I talk about in the private road. So far it's been popular, and I'm trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, it's really fun. I'm glad you did it, and it just kind of, I guess, encapsulates your whole philosophy about the world financial system, where we've been, where we are, and where we're heading, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there are some solutions. I get into that. Where do we go from here after everybody can see the collapse coming now? And it's just a matter of when and then how we recover from it. And I talk about that in the book. And there are ways to get out of this mess. And the mess is not caused by this coming, it's not the crash that is the problem. It's the complicated structure of our system today that is the problem. The unbacked fiat system with massive amounts of debt out there that truly is. And you see it through Greece. Nobody can pay off their debt. Everybody likes to laugh about Greece not being able to pay off their debt, but name one country in the world that can, and the United States is the largest debtor nation in the world. There's no way we plan to pay off our debt. It's just, when is the game going to end?
And not only can pay off their debts, but nobody really wants to pay off their debts either, do they?
Well, no. I mean, if you look at the very nature of a debt-based currency, the expansion of that currency has to continually happen just to pay the interest. You can't have people paying off their debt because then there'll be no money available to pay the interest on the debt. So it's one of those bubbles that has to keep blowing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then one day you just walk away. And that's kind of where we're getting to. I think it's coming. It's started now. I think it's coming. We're looking at September now. Most people I've talked to are saying, yeah, September is kind of the end of the end. And then we'll have to figure out what to do after that.
So when we say debt-based currency, I understand what you mean by that, but you got to explain it. What is a debt-based currency?
Well, you just look at the Federal Reserve note. It's not an asset. It is a note. It's an IOU for $1 from the Federal Reserve. And every time that there's money printed today, it's issued as debt. The banks create most of the money. People think the Federal Reserve does. No, but it's the banks. The banks basically are leverage lenders. They lend for every dollar they have, they can lend $15 to $20. And all those have an interest rate attached to them. When they lend out money for your house, that's money that they create out of thin air. And then all of a sudden, there's a need for interest to be paid on that money. So it all has to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, or there won't be enough money to pay the interest on the money that's being created. So it goes around and around. And all you got to do is think of it as blowing this balloon up bigger and bigger and bigger. And as soon as it starts to shrink, that's when the whole thing implodes. Because if people start paying off their debt, there's no new money to pay off the interest that's owed on the old money. So it has to continually grow.
So geometrically, then, arithmetically, at some point it becomes impossible to even just pay off the interest, doesn't it?
Well, it always is impossible. I mean, it's the way the system is set up, because every new dollar you create that is created as debt, as somebody's debt, you need that dollar plus a little more to pay off the debt plus the interest. So it always has to grow, always has to get bigger until it implodes. And that's why you've seen over the past 3,000 years all these currencies, unbacked currencies that have failed. Because if you don't back a currency, you can basically, mankind gives themselves the ability to print as much as they want. And invariably, a country, a person, a corporation will print more than they deserve and more than they need, and then it blows up. So, the cycle repeats over and over and over, and we're getting near the end of that cycle where, and this just happens to be the biggest bubble in human history. The creation of the dollar and the monetary instruments that are derived from the dollar, like derivatives. All those are based off of some kind of underlying asset, but they're blown up and hypothecated and rehypothecated until it's so big that it's unmanageable. And that's where we are now, is that the markets are becoming unmanageable, even to those who control the money and control the derivatives.
Some people like Martin Armstrong say it isn't really the currency that's the problem. It's really the government issuing unlimited amounts of debt that's the problem. Do you see it that way?
I watched his latest conference. It was called the Solutions Conference. He's a smart guy. Don't get me wrong. He is the smartest out there. And I agree with most of his stuff. He doesn't think we can go back onto a gold and silver standard. He sees gold and silver as a barter system, because they're hard commodities. They are commodities. If people choose to use them as money, that's bartering in commodities. You're trading your house for 10 pieces of gold, and it's not really a currency, is the way he explained it. And I agree with him to some extent, although what his solution is to get rid of taxes, to crash the system totally, which it's going to crash anyway. I was surprised to hear him say that. But yeah, to crash the system totally, get rid of all taxes, all federal taxes, and have the government issue their own money for their own people. Basically, the rest of the world be damned for a while. And then over time, it's the only way to get rid of the problem now. And then over time, people can choose what they want to use as money. If you want to use gold and silver, that's fine to use as money. It's more of a form of barter, according to him. His take is, let the local governments tax you for what you need, fixing of your streets and to pay for the schools. Federal government should be very limited, just like the Constitution says, and they should be very constrained on creating money. And it was interesting. I'm still trying to digest how we can get there. And he says the only way to get there is to have the system crash, so that people are angry enough to try to move forward and move on to something different and something that works better for them.
Yeah, it's just so dangerous when a crash occurs, because it's like Humpty Dumpty. You can't get it back together again. You don't really know what the new system is going to be until it's up there and who's going to be calling the shots, right?
Well, has always been my take, is who are going to be the deciders? And I was always of the opinion that with gold and silver as money, it's constitutionally kind of in our blood. And in the United States, I always thought that there didn't need to be any deciders. If we go back to using gold and silver as money, that's what it says in the Constitution. That's what our country was founded on. And it was the derivatives off of that, the paper receipts for gold and silver, that all that paper money that was made, and now it's electronic money, that was the problem. Gold and silver standards were never that big of a problem until all the derivatives got attached to them. So I do see us going back to some kind of gold and silver standard. And, not everybody has to buy into that. If people want to use paper, Federal Reserve notes, go for it. I just don't think that they will be accepted once the banks crash and nobody has, you can't get money out of your ATM. Not many people have stacks of dollar bills and even the coinage of the United States that's been minted by the U.S. Mint. It's not Federal Reserve notes, but yeah, how far will that take you? Well, I don't know. If all the banks are closed, you can be happy you have that jar of coins back there.
It might come in very handy, that's for sure. And yeah, but as far as what's going on now, it really seems to be escalating out of control, doesn't it?
Yeah, all eyes are on Greece right now. They have no intention of paying off their debt. They have no intention of putting strict austerity measures on, and nobody else does either. Truthfully, they're running the game for as long as it goes, and then they're going to walk away. Greece has already talked to Russia about coming in under its wing, and will that happen? Probably. I mean, when Greece walks away, though, you've got the derivative implosion. You've got banks that hold Greek debt, and that'll set off the credit default swaps. And all of a sudden, that whole system in Europe starts falling apart. And the U.S. is just as knee deep in that as the European banks. So, there's no way that a small crash can be managed through with the system we have today. And it could be, that just tells you how weak the system is and how weak, especially the European Union. You have a little country like Greece that is basically saying, well, we don't want to play anymore, and they're going to walk away, and that'll tumble and destroy all of the EU. That's how weak that system is, that the smallest player leaves, and all of a sudden the game is over.
Yeah, obviously they must be somewhat important because they got the world begging them, please don't go. And they've managed to keep them here so far, but you got to wonder how much longer this is going to go on for.
I don't think much longer. I mean, if I was looking the other day at kind of the date, the timeline of when their payments are due, and it's like every week or two there's another $1 billion due on another bond that they had outstanding, and they got their pensions to pay, and there's a lot of people on the dole there. So it's kind of okay, if they get a bailout this time, the bailouts they don't go to the people of Greece, they go to the banks who are their creditors. So the bailouts are not for Greece; they're for the people who own the Greek bonds, which is mainly the banks and the EU and things like that. So it's a circular problem, and everybody knows it. Even Greece says, they'll laugh to the very last day because they know that if they walk away, it's everybody's problem. And so the EU will try everything they can to keep them in the EU. But, I don't see it anymore. I see the people saying, you tried to impose this system on us, and it's not beneficial to us, and it won't work. So we're going to leave. And then you can have Spain and Italy and France, they're all going to leave too. And Germany's not going to want to bail everybody out, so they're going to leave. Everybody's leaving.
Yeah. Everybody, it's kind of like with the last person gone, please turn out the lights, right?
Yeah, but these lights they're big lights. There's so many derivatives. Look at the largest derivative player in the world is Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank has 75 trillion in derivatives. Last week, they failed the U.S. bank stress test.
Yeah.
You've got the largest derivative manipulator in the world failing a stress test in the United States. You got problems.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've had these problems for a while. They've kicked the can down the road for many years. It's hard to believe, Vix, that it's been going on since 2008. Here we are, 2015, 7 years. They've managed to keep this thing going. It's remarkable.
It is. And wait, it's not just the 7 years. It's since 1971 when we went off the gold standard. If you backtrack, and I talk about this in the book, backtracking through the 7-year cycle. Do you remember Christine Lagarde last year came on, I think it was the national press, and gave this really weird speech about the Magic 7? Do you remember that speech she gave?
Yeah, I kind of remember that. Yeah.
It was all about numerology, and it was really bizarre, and everybody's scratching their head saying, what is the head of the IMF doing? And it gets back to the 7-year cycle in like the Jewish Shemitah, which is like every 7 years you need a jubilee. And if you backtrack from it's coming up this September, I think it's around the 13th. But if you backtrack 7 years from that, you got 2008 in September, right when that crash hit and all the short-term funds dried up. And you backtrack 7 years from that, you got 9/11, almost to the day. And it's kind of like you keep going back. You get the bond crisis in 94, the stock market crash in 1987, and you can just keep going back and back. And after a while, you think, well, is this some kind of divine intervention idea, or is this these fanatics who run all these monetary systems pressing the self-destruct button every year to get themselves cleansed of all their bad doings so they can start fresh? I think that's more along the lines of what's happening is the bad guys, as I call them, are planning, at least I think it's already started, but by September to press that reset button because they're in so much trouble and they need a way to get out of it.
Yeah, and it seems it's a cycle too. The Islamic world, they're not allowed to charge interest on any debt. So
they get, the way they get around it is to increase the purchase price. Just factor in how much interest they would claim over the 10-year deal, and then they just double the purchase price and say, oh well, we won't call it interest. We're just going to double the purchase price, and then you pay us just regular payments for 10 years.
Yeah, discount. It's just a discount, effectively.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a fiction, but it doesn't work in this world. You got to put money to work. You can't not have interest, let's face it. But the problem is, I guess, fractional reserve banking that has taken this whole thing to an art form. And fractional reserve banking is always going to wind up putting us in the position that we're in now, right?
Well, now if it was just fractional reserve banking, it might be manageable. The problem now is since the invention of electronic assets in the 1960s and 70s is when it was Alan Greenspan invented the first computer programs, the first banking system. That was the invention of electronic assets.
Right.
And now we don't think much about it. But back then, I mean, that was huge. And now we can create these derivatives with electronic means, and it's not even fractional reserve banking. If JP Morgan has 50 trillion in derivatives and a couple trillion in assets, that is a big problem. And they do. And same with Citibank, who in the last 3 or 4 years has just exploded their derivative book. And they took over the silver short position from HSBC. It's just gigantic. Citi is and JP Morgan are the two banks that are basically just heading straight for the wall at 5,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, with no brakes, no parachute, no nothing. And what happens?
Yeah, but we're all on that bus with them. That's the problem. It would be fine if it was just them that crashed into the wall, but they're taking us all down with them.
Yeah. You got to wonder. So, hey, what do you think of Greenspan's demeanor and his behavior since he's left the Fed?
I think it's exactly what I was saying all along, that he did this all on purpose. From the early 1960s when he created the first computer rigging programs to his work with Arthur Burns, the head of the Fed in the early 70s. And then that's why they put the biggest gold bug in the world in charge of the Fed in 1987. And Greenspan was that guy. And everybody was shaking their heads saying, oh, my God, why are they putting Alan Greenspan to head the Fed? And what he did is he blew up the bubble as bigger than anybody before him. And that was his job, blow it up until it pops. And then once it pops, go back to the gold standard. And that's what he's saying now. He's talking about how lousy the economy is. He's talking about how great gold is. He's talking about the end of globalization. All exactly what the plan was that he laid out in the early 70s.
So he's got to have a plan for after this thing blows up as well. Because
he does. Yeah, right? Sure.
So what do you think his exact plan is, Pix?
Well, his plan, according to the Road to Ruta, the stuff that I look at comes out of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And it's these comic books about this little girl, Ruta, who decides how to get back into a system. And it's all about having gold backed for your currency, a gold backing, because without it, any system's going to self-destruct. So Alan Greenspan his original plans, and it's all there at the Fed Boston. You can check out my website. It's all in the book too. His original plan was run the system as long as hard as you can, soaking up all the benefits of unbacked money. And then when it gets so big that you can't control it anymore, crash the system, wipe out all the debt and all the electronic assets, start fresh with a reallocation of gold money within the United States and do it according to Social Security benefits that are paid in. Everything else will be gone, all the pensions and the 401ks. But that Social Security IOU that everybody has built up over the years, some have it big one, some have a small one. That was his idea back in the 70s, to reallocate money after the system implodes according to Social Security balances. That's why they cap Social Security. I think it's $120,000 a year. After that, you don't have to pay into Social Security anymore. That's why they cap it. They don't want the ultra rich and they don't want the ultra poor. They want it somewhere right in the middle. And that was his plan, to allocate it according to Social Security balances.
Really? And that's going to be it? Social Security is going to be the basis of the new economic system, huh?
Within the United States. And if you think about it, everybody right now says, oh my God, you can't live off Social Security. But if that's the only money, the purchasing power of it'll be a true dollar, probably a silver dollar, will buy you more than just a men's suit. It'll buy you maybe a nice car. It's all about how much money is out there. Right now, there's zillions of dollars in monetary instruments out there. So the amount you get for Social Security doesn't mean much. You can get a loaf of bread. But if you wipe away all those electronic assets and reallocate money according to your Social Security balances, you'll have the people who've worked the hardest and the longest will have the most, and the people who are still working and just starting out will have a little, but they'll get some. And the purchasing power of that new money will be extraordinary. Yeah. Because there is no fiat money out there. That will have been wiped clean. And
people who own gold and silver, they've got a big leg up, right?
If they own the physical stuff in their own possession, yes. If they own
ETFs,
silver, ETFs, silver mining companies, although, I used to love the miners, but at the end of the day, countries are going to be losing everything. They're going to nationalize their mines, even in the United States. I really believe they'll be, because there's so few. Yeah, there's so few people who own physical metal that every country is going to be scraping to get it. And the people, if you have 330 million people screaming that you screwed up the system and now we have to go back to gold and silver, and we don't want these people who invested in mining companies to be like ultra billionaires. That was the problem. We need to allocate that to the rest of the population.
I wonder what'll happen with the Canadian closed-end funds like CEF and GT. What is it? GTU?
Yeah. I think, it all depends on how the country deals with private ownership of large amounts. You've got such a large amount in a single place.
It's too tempting, huh?
It's very tempting for the government to walk in and say, hey, this is ours. Or for the people who run that system as the chaos is coming up to just open the vault, take all that out of here and, head for the hills with their family and friends. French
Revolution. Anyway, Bix.
True. John Law, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. Bix, your website, your book, where do we find you? How do we get the book?
You can go to roadtoruta.com. The book is the very first line item there. It's called Silver, Gold, Bitcoin, and God. And it's a fun read, and it's only $25, so you can.
Yeah. All right. And hey, want to thank you again for coming on. And we've got a link to purchase the book on financialsurvivalnetwork.com on the show notes to this interview. Don't forget, take a look at financialsurvivalnetwork.com, your go-to place for all the info you need for what's going on here. And Bix, we will talk with you again soon. Thanks so much for stopping on, and great luck on the book.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.